Imagine you're looking for a cash buyer for your real estate deal. Whether you're an investor, an agent, or a wholesaler, you need to find cash buyer data to move your deal or your contract. I'm gonna show you 2 different ways to find cash buyers in 3 different platforms. It's a lot easier to use software to find your cash buyers, and I wanna show you guys the proper way to do it. 3 different things to help you make a decision on which platform is the best for you. I'm looking at a property in Durham, North Carolina. The 3 softwares I use to look up cash buyers are gonna be Propwire, Propstream, and Investorlift. Now, I know you guys are gonna comment a million times about a million different softwares that you use and why they're the best. These are the 3 I use, so comment below if you use something else and why yours is the best since sliced bread, because I wanna hear about it. First, we're gonna be looking at our flip data. We wanna see who our flippers are in this area. So I have a random address in Durham, North Carolina that I'm gonna click on. So here is the property in Durham, North Carolina. Let's just say this is our subject property, even though it's completely random. As we're looking for cash buyers, there's really 2 different types. There's either a flipper in the area or somebody buying and holding properties as rental. But remember this, as you're looking for flip comps, you're really looking for the seller information because they've already sold the property. And because they're the seller, now we want to also see who the listing agent was on that flip. Because if an investor is buying a property cash, they're putting work into it, and they're listing it on the MLS to exit to a retail buyer, they have a close relationship with that listing agent. A lot of times that listing agent is actually the cash buyer or investor themselves because they get their real estate license, so they save money on the commission. But at the very least, we can always get a hold of the listing agent because their phone number is listed in this software and on the internet somewhere. So always important to find the listing agent on the flippers. And then your buy and hold guys, they're now going to be the buyer in the software and in the data. So we got to find that buyer's information, and if they did buy it on market, meaning on the MLS, they typically bought it using a buyer's agent. So that's the agent now that we want to find, get a hold of, and call if we can't find the buyer's information specifically. So I'm going to show you guys on these 3 different platforms, the ease of it, how to work it, how to find the data. So stay tuned. First, I want to see, okay, this is a 1,334 square feet. Like when I'm pulling flip data, what I really care about is the square footage, because it doesn't really matter what the bed and bath count is. Your flipper is going to add a bedroom or add a bathroom if they have to get the most value out of the property. But when I'm pulling data, I want to go a little bit wide, and I want to see, you know, similar square footage in your build. So ours is 1,334 square feet, and it was built in 1930. I want to find my flippers that are buying and flipping houses that are kind of similar to mine. It doesn't have to be exact. That's why we go with a wide square footage and, you know, close to a year build. So if ours is 1,334 square feet, I'm going to look for any flipper flipping 1,000 square foot properties to 2,000 square foot properties, because somebody flipping a 2,000 square foot property is definitely going to want to flip something 1,334 square feet, and somebody that's flipping 1,000 square foot properties is going to want to flip this property as well. So I leave that nice and wide. One cool thing about Propwire is, you know, it doesn't really apply to this application, but if you are looking up comps, like this is our subject property, so it doesn't make sense on this particular property, but you can contact the owner straight from this one page with a click of a button, and they have skip tracing integrated. So you can find this property owner's information with a click of a button with cheap skip tracing. So it's nice and easy. But this is our subject property. We're looking for the flippers. Remember that. One thing I don't like about it is if you click on your comps for this particular property, we can see where our property is here on the map, and we can scroll down a little bit and we can look at anything that was sold, because remember, we're looking for flips, sold in the last year. We want to go a mile out on our flip data, so we can adjust that to a mile. But then when we click on the More tab, we can edit a few things like square footage. We can go plus or minus 20%, let's say. Any year build we can do within 20 years because we want that nice big data set. But the one thing it's lacking is we cannot see who our cash buyers or our flippers were straight from this comps tab of our subject property, which really sucks because it would be nice to be able to see who our cash buys and our flippers were without having to click on these individually. Like these just say sold, and there's got a price on there, but it's not telling us these were either sold cash or they were flipped. So we'd have to dig into each one of these manually and it would slow us way down. So it's not the greatest way to look for flips from our subject property comp tab. What we have to do in this case is we'll take the zip code. If we go to the main page, we can look up the zip code here, which in this case is 27703. If we click on lead types, we can click on flipped properties. So this is automatically going to show your flipped properties. And then we just want to look for single family homes. So we filter that. Beds and baths, remember, we don't really care. All right. And then there's this more tab. So again, we don't care about bed and bath count. Let's click on more filters. There's a few different sections here. Property filters, we've already selected single family homes. The building square footage, remember, we're doing 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. And the year build, we want a nice wide data set. And this is a 1930 build, meaning it's just old. So we can go 1900 to 1960. Anybody flipping those types of properties is 100% okay with flipping a 1930s house. Now, if the year build was like 2010, I wouldn't do that wide of a data set, but old is old. 1960 is the same as 1920. It's the same as 1940, 1930. It's just old. So that's the only criteria we really dig into. For owner filters, you can get deep in the weeds on this, but there's really no reason to. Really all the data we're looking for is single family, flipped houses, the right building size, the right year build, and let's click save and close there. And now if we zoom in on our area, this is the one thing I don't like about it, where if you could just pull up the subject property and look at the map, it'd be great of the comps. But instead we had to go out, look at the zip code, and then zoom in on the map of all the flipped houses in the area. So that's the one faux pas on Propwire that I don't like. It's not that big of a deal because you can still find good data, but I wish it was just in that comp tab of our subject property. It'd be a lot easier so you don't got to click around. But this is going to show now all of our flipped properties in this area, and the automatic flip calculator, let's say, is going to just show properties that were bought low and sold high within the last 24 months. Like that's how it filters this. It's automatic. So if we're clicking on these individually, this was a flipped property. Again, it doesn't really make sense to contact the owner now because that owner's an end buyer. Remember, we're looking for the seller of this property. One other thing I don't like about Propwire is when we're now clicking on this flipped property, what's most important to me is, hey, who sold this property? And it's difficult to find, if at all. So now if we click on the history of the transaction of this property, this can be a little confusing for those of you that aren't looking at this data all the time. So there's gonna be listed transaction timeline on the left-hand side of your screen for this flip. If we look at the first one, it says warranty deed, meaning this is gonna be the lender that now has a lien on the house, basically. If we look at the next list there, it says transfer. So this is now the end buyer of the flip. It's Nicholas. He bought this house to live in it. He's an end buyer. This property was flipped before Nick bought it. So that doesn't really give us any information we need. Next, we scroll down and it says listing history and it says pending, meaning it was pending on the MLS. Like we're working backwards now. Nicholas had bought it, but before then it was pending, okay? Next, we see another warranty deed and who the lender was, hopefully for the flipper, right? And if we look even further, now it says construction loan. And if we click on that, it says transaction type construction loan, grantee name House of Storm LLC. So this House of Storm LLC is our flipper's information. This is the person that bought it and then took a construction loan out, flipped the property, listed it, and then sold to an end buyer. So you got to click a lot to find that information. All right. So that's all the clicking you have to do and research you have to do to find the seller of this flip, meaning they're the flipper that flipped it, listed it, and sold it to an end buyer. Now, to get that person's information, there's a lot of different strategies. You can use a skip tracing tool, or you can go to Open Corporates, which I'll show in a later video, and find the owner of that LLC, and then go to Fast People Search and find their phone number. So that's all for another video on how to find this flipper's information. I just want to show you guys on these software programs how we look for that flipper. And then on a later video, I'm going to show you how to find their information, because on Propwire, it doesn't give us their phone number. We're going to have to either go into this platform and skip trace it, or go out of the platform to find their phone number, which is, another thing I don't love about the software. So we do have the flipper's information now, House of Storm LLC. We know that's the person that flipped it. But remember, I said we want to find the flipper's information, and we also want to find the listing agent's information. So if this flipper flipped a property and listed it on the MLS and it's now sold, there's nowhere on here to find out who the listing agent was of the property. No matter what you're looking on any of the data of this comparable of this flip, we do not find a listing agent anywhere on it. So we're going to have to get out of this platform to find the listing agent. So let's Google search the address of this flip. If we click on it on Zillow, it shows that it's sold. We knew that. We knew it was flipped. And we're going to have to scroll all the way down to what special section of Zillow. And then it's going to say listed by, and it's going to give us the listing agent. So this listing agent, their phone number is actually on the Zillow listing. So we can call them, their phone number's there, their name's there. Sometimes their email is either there or very easy to find. If their phone number is not there, you can always just Google them. It's usually the very first thing that pops up, because listing agents, they need their information out there so people can contact them. Very easy to get a hold of listing agents on these flips. That's why I always say, pull the buyer's information, but also pull the listing agent's information, because you 100% can get this guy's number. It's right here on Zillow. So it's a good platform. Propwire is a good platform for finding your flips, but you are going to have to get out of the platform to find listing agents, to find more information about the flipper that sold the property. You're going to have to go into some skip tracing to find their phone number, find out who owns that LLC. That's a difficult thing to do no matter what platform you're using. So remember, always also look for the listing agent, because you can absolutely get a hold of them and they can bring this opportunity to their flipper buyer who's going to buy your property cash. Let's go on to Propstream now. So Propstream is a platform that I use probably mostly in my business. It's not as easy to use, meaning the interface of it, but it does have a lot of information, a lot of data, which is what I like. And I'm just used to using it because I've used it for so long. So we take this same subject property and we click on the details of it. Now here's what's different between Propstream and Propwire. We can go to comparables and nearby listings under the tab of our subject property. And if we click on flip comps, which is a tab there, all these 13 properties that flipped within 1 mile of our subject property, made our criteria 1,000 to 2,000 square feet like we did the other one. And we can make our year build, again, 1900 to 1960. So we're comparing apples to apples, okay? And this is all flips that were sold in the last 12 months, which it automatically does. So now we're down to 10 flip comps. What I like about Propstream is as we click on these flips, it does tell us what their gross profit was. It says what they purchased it for and what the flip amount was, meaning what they sold it for. So you can look at the gross profits on this column, and let's just click randomly on one of these flips. And if we click the details of this flip, let's see what it gives us. First tab of property details. It's going to give us some really good information because it tells us who the buyer was, which we don't really care. This is the end buyer. He's not our investor. What we care about is the seller information, the guy who flipped this. And if we scroll down to last sale information, this sold on January 29th of this year, 2025 for 340 grand. Not only does it give our buyer information here, but it also gives our seller information. So here's the LLC that actually flipped property. Again, you're gonna have to go into another platform to find this flipper's information, but this is an easy way to at least find out the name of that flipper or the LLC. You're gonna have to skip trace it somewhere else or do it manually, but it does tell us their information, which is great. Another thing that it does is if you click on MLS details, which is the next tab over, again, it's gonna show us the listing dates, the sold, the 340, everything we knew about it already. But if we scroll down here, it does give us agent information, and it's gonna show us the listing agent of this property. Not only does it give the agent's cell phone number, which is typical under agent's phone number, it also gives the office name or usually the broker this agent works for, and it usually gives the broker phone number or the office phone number, which is how it's listed here. So if we wanted to get a hold of this investor that flipped this property, who is now the seller of this property, it would be really difficult, no matter what software you use, to find out who owns this LLC. It would take some time and effort and calling multiple numbers to try and figure out who owns it and if you can get a hold of them. But with a click of a button on the MLS details on Propstream, we can scroll down and get the listing agent information and call it in a split second. So all the agent information is under the comparables tab of the properties that are the comps for your subject property, which is nice and easy. It's very easy to find, and you can just rip through phone calls of all your flipped properties, which is super easy. You could just go right down the line on all these flips and do exactly the same thing. Just click on the property that was flipped, click details. You can find the seller's information, meaning that was the flipper. And then you can click on MLS details and find the agent information and call it. A lot of times under agent information as well, their email will be listed. So not only do you get their phone number, you also get their email. So it's a great way to pull these 10 agents really fast and then take the LLCs or the seller, the flipper information, and skip trace it and try to get a hold of them as well. You just go right down the line with all these flip properties, 10 really fast contacts to get a hold of your cash buyers that are flipping in this area. Now, if we go over to Investorlift, here's another platform I use on a daily basis. They have what's called God mode. And if we take the same exact address and look in God mode data of Investorlift, there's two different tabs here on the left-hand side. We're just looking at our flippers right now. So we click on the flip tab so we can see every property that's been flipped. Bed and bath count, remember, we don't really care. Building square footage, we did the same thing, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. ARV percentage, we don't care. And then sell date range, we went a year back, just like we did with the other platforms. Now this is gonna give us 13 properties. So now we can see, okay, here's 13 flips that happened just using God mode data. There's a couple reasons I really like God mode. And it's because what I said earlier in the video, there's two types of cash buyers. There's gonna be your flippers who bought cash, flipped the property and sold it to an end buyer. But there's also gonna be your buy and hold investors. I'm going to go over the buy and hold process on each of these platforms next, but I do want to mention Investorlift is really easy because with a click of a button, you can just jump over to your buy and hold properties and investors on the same exact page. That's why I really like it. But let's stay with the flips and let's scroll down. So here it gives us a list of those 13 properties. It gives us the address of the property that was flipped. It gives us purchase date, sale date, how many days they held it, and typically it will give us purchase price, sale price, gross profit, and ARV. Now this first one is a big, huge hedge fund that is almost impossible to get a hold of. I just happen to know that. So I want to skip to the next one and just see what else is being listed as a flip. Because this one's going to give us more information because it's not this big funky hedge fund. So the second comp or second flip that Investorlift shows us on God mode is a property. It gives us an address. It gives us a purchase date, a sale date, and holding time. This one was only held for 59 days. And it also gives us the purchase price. What the flipper paid for it was $276, and what they sold it for was $310, with a gross profit of $34,000. And they made that in less than 60 days. So this could have been a wholesale opportunity or something for this investor. What I like about Investorlift and the data is it does give us some phone numbers for these LLCs. Everybody shares the skip trace data on Investorlift. So, these numbers aren't always accurate, but you at least have 3 numbers to call and see if that's the flipper's actual phone number. So it does give you a leg up there. But most of the time, we're going to have to go to another skip tracing platform or even do it manually to get that flipper's information, because these numbers in this skip tracing isn't always 100%. So, I don't know what the percentages of these phone numbers being accurate, but be prepared that you're probably going to have to go to other platforms or do it manually to find out the owner's information, the seller that flipped this property. Another thing it doesn't give us is the listing agent information. Propstream is the only platform that pulls that data out of the platforms we're using today. So you are going to have to cross-reference, again, Zillow to see who the listing agent was on this flip. So we're just going to pull this one up on Zillow again, like we had to do with Propwire. We're going to scroll down to what's new, or what's special, and then this is going to give our listing agent information right there. We can see their name, their phone number, their brokerage, and we can call them. So always start with the listing agents on these flips, because you can rip through these numbers. It's nice and easy. It's free. Their numbers out there. We can have great conversations with agents so they can get this subject property in front of their flippers. But, it is important to also pull the actual flipper's information. It just can take a little bit of time and a little bit of money to get that information, but at the very least, we can absolutely call these listing agents. So after looking at the 3 different platforms, specifically just for pulling our flipper data, I do say that Propstream probably shines just because everything's so centrally located. We didn't have to go to Zillow at all on Propstream. Everything was right there. Where on Propwire and Investorlift, we did have to get outside the platform to find out who the listing agent was. Investorlift is really the only platform that shows some phone numbers for that flipper. They're not always accurate, so a lot of the time you are going to have to get out of that platform to find out who that flipper's information was, meaning their phone number. But at the very least, we can call through those numbers, and you will get lucky sometimes with getting a hold of these LLCs, strictly through Investorlift. So right now, I would say, Propstream, probably number 1. It's why we use it every single day for this type of data, because it's just faster. If you're locking up 1 contract or 5 contracts and you're looking to find your cash flippers, your investors, people who are flipping houses in this area, you want it quick and easy, and you can pull a list of, 10 flippers like we saw on Propstream and click through all of them and call those listing agents, pull those flippers, LLCs and names, throw them in a skip tracing platform and get their numbers as well. It's just a little bit easier, and that's why we like to use it. Next, I'm going to show you our buy and hold investors, how that process works on each of these platforms and why that's important. And we'll see which one of these software shines using that method. Okay, so let's start with Propwire. Again, you can't go to our subject property and click on comps to find your cash buys. That's not a filter in your comparables. But what we can do is zoom in on the map, which our property is in this little space right here. And then we can click on lead types. We're going to click off of our flippers now, and we're going to click on cash buyers. So this is going to show all of our cash buys. We're going to filter this down a little bit, but click of a button shows our cash buys. That's pretty easy, especially when you're pulling, big bulk data for reaching out to cash buyers. Next is property types. Again, we're just going to keep it on single families because that's what we have. And then if we move over to more, remember we kept single family homes. The building size, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. And then the year build was 1900 to 1960. We're going to keep all that. But the one filter we want to make sure we put into this criteria for just cash buys is we don't want to go 10 years back on our cash buys. That'd be way too much data. What we want to do is we want to go 1 to 3 years back, depending on how much data that gets us. So let's just start with 1 year back. And again, property filters, that should be all good because we've already filtered single family, square footage, and year build. And then when we click on owner filters, these are all cash buys, so we don't got to mess with that. Years of ownership is something we can definitely filter, where a maximum or minimum of 1 to 3. But there's a better way to do it. And if we click on financial filters, not much in there that we need to click on. Foreclosure filters, MLS filters, not much in there either. The one thing we do want to click on is last sale date. So this is where you would filter your 1 to 3 years. So like I said, let's just go 1 year back and see who our cash buy comps are in this area. And it's really easy on this calendar, because we could just one click 2024, and then we can click save and close. So what we want to do is go 1 year back with a click of a button. It gives us this drop down to 2024 April. And the one thing we want to filter, like I said, is let's just go 1 year back. I usually go 1 to 3 years depending on how much data it gets me. So clicking on last sale date here, if we click on the left hand side, we can go 1 year back with a click of a button, drop down to 2024. It's April 16th today. All you got to do is click on 2024. It stays April 16th. Click on the 16th and it fills it in right here on last sale date. So this is going to show any cash buyer under our criteria that bought a year ago up until today's date. If we leave this right hand side open, click save and close. And now if we zoom in on our area here, this is going to show all these cash buys. Now, these could be some false positives in here. Somebody that sold a house and bought a house and it's owner occupied, you can filter for non-owner occupied in there. There is going to be some in here that are flippers that are in the middle of a flip, but the majority of them are going to be buy and hold investors. Somebody that buys houses cash and then just holds on to them forever. They're just looking for tax depreciation, cash on cash investment. So these are typically your buy and hold investors. But let's just click on the first one. This one's going to show now the property. This one's a 1,200 square feet. We know it's a cash buyer. It was sold on the MLS. It's an absentee owner. Great. Now, what's cool about Propwire, when you're using this method of finding your cash buyers, is you can just click contact the owner and it's going to show you the owner's full name and mailing address. And then all you got to do is click skip trace and it's going to shoot their number out. So it is really nice for your buy and hold guys, because these are the owners of these properties and you can find their number with a click of a button, and it's really cheap. It's like less than a quarter to find this buyer's number. So it's really nice. So that's how you're going to find your buy and hold investors using Propwire, is just going through your list and clicking contact owner. This is our cash buyer. We're going to click skip trace and get their number and give them a call and see if they want another opportunity. One thing I wish these platforms had was buyer agent information. We know on this property it was sold on the MLS because it says MLS sold. That's another great little tip on Propwire, is it tells us it was sold on the MLS cash. It wasn't off market. That's great, because now I know, hopefully if I cross-reference this, it's going to show me the buyer agent data, but there is no buyer agent data in Propwire. You got to go outside of the platform. So let's take this address and we'll Google it. Let's click on Zillow again, the almighty Zillow. It does say sold. We know it was sold cash. And then we're going to have to scroll down again to what's special. And now this is very typical on your buyer's agents. Remember, on our flip properties, we were looking for the listing agent. And And the listing agent typically does have their phone number, has their brokerage, sometimes they'll even have their email in there. Very rarely, or if at all, is your buyer agent phone number gonna be on here. The only place I've ever seen buyer agent information at all is Zillow. So there's no other platforms where you can even find who the buyer's agent was other than Zillow. So that's great that we have Zillow and we can find out who that was, but very rarely are you gonna see their phone number on there or at all. But all you have to do is grab this buyer agent information. Now, meaning, why is this important? Remember, this house, which is one of our cash comps, we know an investor bought this house and is now holding on to it. They're either renting it out or gonna rent it out, or they're doing a rehab on it. But they use this buyer's agent to buy properties on the MLS cash. So if we can't get a hold of the actual buyer, because it's an LLC, it's hard to skip trace. Now we know we can get a hold of this buyer's agent, even if the phone number is not on Zillow. Let me just Google his name, his license number, and his brokerage. And one of the first things that pops up is realtor.com. It's got our guy's name, it's got his license number, and on the right hand side, it does have office and mobile number. They're the same number, but it's great. We got his phone number with a click of a button. So you're gonna have to click around a little bit on any of these softwares to find the buyer agent information, but it's very important to get that because we can call this agent and he can get us in touch with his buyer that's buying cash, or at least send them this opportunity. So that's the way to find your cash buys on Propwire. Now, let's see how we would do it on Propstream. Again, this is the same property. We were here in the flip comps before, but let's just go to our comparables in general. And this is going to show every property that sold within a half a mile from our subject property in the last year with the criteria we put in here. So it automatically does a year back. We filtered it 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. It automatically does a half a mile, but I'm gonna put in another couple filters in here. If I click on property class, I'm just looking for residential because that's what we have. And if I look at property type, I wanna click on single family because that's what we have. So I wanna cut out as much fat as humanly possible. Remember, year build, we can do 1900 to 1960. So we're gonna filter this down even more. So now this is still giving us 40 comparable properties. And these are going to be properties that sold any which way, meaning cash, conventional, lending, everything. But the way to filter for cash buys specifically is public records sales situation. And if we click on that and we only click cash buyers, now it's just going to give us our cash buyers in the area. Now, this one only gave us one cash buy and one rental. So rentals are going to show up as cash buys, and so are true cash buys. So if you're only getting one cash buy, once you filter it down, there's a couple things you can do. I usually go 1 year, 1 mile out, because a mile typically is okay for cash buyer data. Now this gives us 11 properties. If you still wanted more data, then I would start going 2 years back, then 3 years back. But on this one, let's just stick with a mile. And if we click on our first one that was a cash buy, because we filtered it that way, you're gonna see these dark green highlights over these numbers on the left-hand side. That means it was a cash buy. Now, there's two different data sets on Propstream. There's going to be your public record data and your MLS data. If you just click on public record, it's not going to show any MLS data. If you just click on MLS, it's not going to show any public record data, and your cash filter goes away. But if you click on both and you have your cash buyer and your criteria right, you can clearly see which properties were sold on the MLS and off the MLS. So why is that important? It's important so we can find our buyer's agent information if it was listed. Let's look at our first property. We're going to click on it. We're going to click on details. Now, remember, Propwire, super easy. You can click on skip trace. It's going to give us the investor's information right there. There's not that feature here in Propstream. It does give us the owner's information, which is our cash buyer, and it does give us their mailing address. But again, we're gonna have to jump out of the platform to skip trace that and find their name and phone number. But one thing it does do, which I do like, is it shows us it was listed on the MLS and bought on the MLS. Now, again, it doesn't give us the buyer's agent information, only the listing agent information, but at least we do know it was sold on the MLS. And again, we would just take this property, look at Zillow. This is the same one. We're going to scroll down and we're going to find the buyer's agent information and Google it and get his phone number. Because again, it's hard to skip trace LLCs. So on Propstream, you got a little bit more clicking around to find the buyer's agent information. And it doesn't allow us to skip trace our LLC straight from that page. But it does give us a nice row of cash buys, and we can find the phone number to our cash buyers pretty easy on another platform. And we can find our buyer's agent just like every single platform we're going to use today by looking at Zillow. So let's look at our last platform, Investorlift. Again, remember I said I like this because everything's centrally located. Before we were looking at flips. Now all we got to do is click on buy and hold, apply search, and now this is going to show us all of our cash buys in this area. Now you're going to have to maybe filter this down a little bit. Let's just go. So we're going to stay 1 mile out. Our building square footage is going to be the same, but we're going to have to filter the ownership start year. Remember, we want to start with about a year back and go up to 3 years if we have to. But ownership start year, let's just filter down to 2024, apply search, meaning there's now 39 properties that are buy and hold properties, cash buys that we can rip through. And these are 1 mile out. It gives us a ton of data. And if we scroll down, we can now see the actual cash buyers information. It does give us a list of phone numbers, not always the most accurate, but we can call through those. If we keep scrolling, we can see, the green numbers here too are typically better numbers than just the highlighted ones. So we can click through these numbers and call, which is really nice. But again, if we're looking, so it does give us a ton of information, a ton of cash buys, some phone numbers in here we can click on. But remember, if we need to look for the buyer's agent information, it's not going to be on any of these software platforms. We're going to have to cross-reference these addresses with Zillow. One other thing I don't love about this Investorlift buy and hold tab is it doesn't really tell us if the property was ever listed on the MLS. So you just have to cross-reference every single one and see which ones were listed and bought cash on the MLS so we can find that buyer's agent. Whereas Propwire and Propstream shows us, hey, this was sold cash to a cash buyer on the MLS or off market. On Investorlift, it doesn't really give us that information. So you'd manually have to check each address and see, was this sold or bought on the MLS or not? Was it completely off market? And we'd have to click on this and we'd have to scroll down and look at the transaction history. This one was not sold on the MLS. So there's not going to be any buyer agent information. So you are going to have to spend a little bit more time on the Investorlift God Mode site for your buy and hold cash buyers, because you're going to have to click through all these addresses and see, did that cash buyer buy it on the MLS or off market? So that can take a little bit more time. But each of these platforms, you can use definitely for finding your flippers or your cash buy and hold buyers. But I would say on this particular process of finding your buy and hold investors or your cash buyers, your raw cash buyer data, I'm going to say Propwire actually shines on this one, simply for the fact that you can see if these properties were bought on the MLS, knowing you only have to search the buyer's agent information on the ones that said they were bought on the MLS, so it cuts out a lot of time. And because you can skip trace individually your cash buyers for every single comp that you pull up. I would say Propstream is a close second on this type of data because it does tell us if it was sold on the MLS or not. You can't really skip trace with a click of a button on here, but it does tell us the MLS information. It gives us the buyers or the cash buyers information and their mailing address. So I would say Propwire shines a little bit more than Propstream on this strategy. And unfortunately, Investorlift, because of all the clicking back and forth at the MLS, it just kind of slows you down a little bit on pulling this data. I would say would be last on your buy and hold cash buyer data. But I would love to see Investorlift fix those few little tweaks, because again, having everything centrally located on God mode is awesome. It's a great platform, and just a couple little tweaks of, listing agent info on the flip data, and at least letting us know if the buy and hold data was bought on MLS or off market, so we only cross-reference the ones that were bought on the MLS, would really make this, number one. So hopefully those changes are coming soon. We'll see. All right, so those are the 3 software platforms I use in my business. Again, pros and cons of each of them, but there's 3 main reasons I want to go over which ones I like the best. And make sure you guys like and comment below and tell me what you think. Also, please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to have 3 different links to each one of these software platforms. So if you guys are interested in hearing more information about one of them, just click on the links. It really helps the channel. It helps me keep producing a lot of content for you guys. And that's my goal, is to give you guys as much information as possible. So if you're interested, click the links in the description, please. So ease of use. I'm gonna rank these 1 to 3 on ease of use. I'm gonna say number 1 is definitely Investorlift. All right, spelling is difficult. It's not my strong suit. So number 1, Investorlift. And I say that because everything is centrally located, flips, buy and holds. You get a list of them. The criteria is easy. Definitely the best for ease of use, 100%. Number 2, I'm actually gonna go with Propstream on this one, for the fact that it's kind of the same reason Investorlift is number 1. Propstream does have a lot of good information where you're not have to clicking around a whole bunch. It's got that flipper tab, which is really nice in the comparables. And it's got the cash buyer selection where you just pulls your cash buys. The criteria and the settings is right there on the same page. So it is really easy to use. Not as easy as Investorlift, but a very close second. And then ease of use, number 3, unfortunately, it has to be Propwire. And the only reason I say that is because, even though you can skip trace your buyers with a click of a button, ease of use meaning having to, go out of your comps tab to then go search the zip code or zoom in on the map and then do another criteria, look up for your flips or your cash buys. It's just not very user friendly. If you can get it down, I'm sure you can do it really fast. But again, it's just not the easiest one to use when you're looking for multiple cash buyers. Amount of data definitely has to go Propstream. The reason I say that is because when you click on your comparables and you click on the flip tab, or you just look at your cash buyer information, remember, this is going to give us, it's the only platform we saw that gave us our listing agent information. So it is the most data. We can see who the seller was on our flip, meaning that was the flipper that sold it to an end buyer. We can see our cash buyers, who owns it now and bought it cash. And we can also see, was it bought cash on the MLS? It'll show us that. And it also shows our listing agent if it was a flipper that sold it on the MLS. So we don't have to go out of that software platform to get all that information. So definitely the most data is definitely in Propstream. A close second, I would say, is going to be Investorlift. And I say that because, and this was a hard decision for me, like what was second and what was third. It's almost a tie for second with Investorlift and Propwire. But the amount of data in Investorlift, meaning it does have skip tracing in the platform, and there's a lot of stuff already skip traced. There is some good numbers in there, even though they are very hit and miss not because of Investorlift's fault. It's just LLCs are really hard to skip trace. You know, Propwire does have a click of a button skip tracing for the owner of a property, which is really, really nice. So I would say those are kind of a tie. I don't want to put Propwire in third place again. So I'm going to go Propwire and Investorlift amount of data as tied for second, and Propstream's definitely number one. Value, I don't even know what these things cost. All right, third is value. Now, this is probably gonna get the most comments because people are gonna bitch about it, but I'm only talking about if you're using these platforms to pull your cash buyer data. I'm not talking about any other list or anything else you do on the platform. If we just look at these three platforms as you're only using them to pull the data we just showed, your flipper data and your buy and hold data, cash buyer data, this is where the value lies. Now, how can you argue with free? I'm gonna say number one has to be Investorlift. Because as we saw, we went on the one page, we could pull the flippers, we could pull the buy and hold data, the cash buyer data, and there's already skip tracing done in God mode, and that's free. But how can you argue with free? God mode is free. Investorlift Lite is a subscription they have now for free, and you can pull that God mode data. So you can't argue with free. I would say for the value being free, Investorlift is number one. Propwire also has a free platform, which is actually the one we were using today. So number two has to be Propwire for this type of data just because it's free. You don't get as much data on Propwire. You are gonna have to pay for the skip tracing on there, but man, how can you argue with free? That gives us so much data. You could jump off the platform and skip trace manually for free. So with literally no money, you can use both of these platforms to find your flippers and find your cash buyers. Number three, in terms of value, simply for cash buyer data, is going to be Propstream. And not because of any other reason other than they don't really have a free version of Propstream. Like you can get a free week or a free 2 weeks using my link in the description, but it doesn't have an overall free account that you can sign up for and click around and use it for free. So because you have to pay for Propstream, I'm gonna say the value on that one has to be number three, even though I love the platform. So we spread the love pretty good on ease of use, amount of data, and value. Now again, we were just using these platforms just for cash buyer data. They all do a ton of other stuff, and we're gonna show you guys videos on everything else these platforms do. And the way they rank is going to be way different for each process we use these platforms for. So, you know, don't sleep on any of these. They're all great platforms. I use them all. They're great companies, tons of good data. You can move deals very easily using any of these at all. So if you guys have any questions, have any comments, make sure you comment below, and I'll see you on the next video.